Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Surface podcast. Today, we're diving into a subject that's often misunderstood yet all around us: narcissism. You've probably heard the term a lot, whether it's taught on social media or used to describe difficult personalities normally. But today, we're going beyond the surface and looking at the history, the complexities, and the nuances of narcissism. First, let's talk about where narcissism came from and why it's such a hot topic now. Narcissism isn't a new phenomenon, by the way. In fact, its roots stretch all the way back to Greek mythology, where the tale of Narcissus, a young man who fell in love with his own reflection, gave the condition its name. But what does it mean to be a narcissist today? Is it just about loving yourself too much, or is there more to the story? To get to the heart of narcissism, we need to dig deeper, as always. So, in psychology, narcissism refers to a personality trait characterized by an exaggerated sense of self importance, a need for excessive admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. But it's important to note that not all narcissists are the same. There's a spectrum, from everyday narcissist behaviors to more pathological manifestations, which can be really damaging, not just the narcissists themselves, but to the people around them. Now, the more extreme form of narcissism is pathological narcissism, a term introduced by Sigmund Freud in the early 20th century. Freud saw narcissism as a developmental phase where an individual's sense of self is both grandiose and fragile. Over time, this condition can evolve into something more deeply ingrained, affecting the person's relationships, mental health, and ability to function in society. He suggested that narcissism is a defense mechanism, a way for individuals to cope with feelings of deep insecurity or emotional injury. The truth is, while Freud was a foundational figure in understanding narcissism, our modern day understanding of the condition goes far beyond his theories. In the late 20th century, psychologists such as Otto Kernberg and Heinz Cote expanded on Freud's work, and their contributions are essential to understanding how narcissism develops and functions today. Kernberg introduced the idea that narcissism involves a lack of emotional regulation, where the narcissist's sense of self is split between an idealized image of themselves and a much weaker, more vulnerable inner self. This inner conflict can lead to feelings of emptiness and rage when the idealized self is threatened. Code, on the other hand, focused more on the emotional development of narcissists, suggesting that early parental neglect or overvaluation could lead to the development of narcissistic traits. But let's take a step back here for a moment. What does all this mean for us in the modern world? Why is it so important that so many people are talking about narcissism today? In recent years, narcissism has become more prominent in popular discourse, especially with the rise of social media and celebrity culture. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok fuel a culture of self promotion, where people are constantly creating their images, seeking likes and validation from others. It's easy to see how narcissistic traits can flourish in this kind of environment. The need for admiration, validation, and a constant sense of superiority. But is this kind of narcissism normal, or is it pathological? That's where it gets tricky, actually. While some narcissistic behaviors are mild and can be seen in many people to varying degrees, pathological narcissism is much more dangerous. It's a condition that disrupts lives, not just in personal relationships, but also in workplaces, families, and even entire societies. This kind of narcissism is defined by three core features: the triple E: exploitation, entitlement, and empathy impairment. These are the characteristics that separate the everyday self centered individual from someone with a truly toxic narcissistic personality disorder. So, where does narcissism come from, and is it something that's learned, or is it in our biology? Studies suggest that early childhood experiences play a significant role in shaping narcissistic traits. In fact, many experts believe narcissism develops when a child receives inconstant emotional support from their parents. For example, a parent who overindulges their child might contribute to an inflated sense of entitlement, whereas a parent who is emotionally distant or neglectful may cause the child to develop fragile self esteem, relying on external sources to feel valued. It's also worth noting that narcissistic traits don't necessarily develop from severe trauma, by the way. Some narcissists grow up in environments where they are constantly praised or told that they are exceptional, sometimes to the point where their self worth becomes entirely dependent on external validation. As they mature, they carry these patterns into adulthood, where they begin to demand admiration and recognition from others. But no matter how they are shaped, narcissistic behaviors, especially pathological ones, can be deeply destructive. Not only do they affect the narcissist, but they also create toxic dynamics in relationships, workplaces, and even political systems. This is where things get tricky again. Many people believe that narcissism is just like a bad habit or something that can be ignored, but narcissism, especially in its pathological form, requires professional intervention. And that's not always easy to come by the way. Narcissists often refuse to acknowledge their behavior, so the idea of healing or change can feel like a distant dream. However, therapies like transference focused psychotherapy, or TFB, and mentalization based treatment, MBT, have shown promises in treating individuals with narcissistic tendencies. To sum up, narcissism is a complex and multifaceted condition. It has deep roots in both early childhood experiences and adult behavior patterns. As we've seen, narcissism can evolve from being a personality trait to a full blown personality disorder that negatively impacts individuals and everyone around them. Understanding these dynamics is the first step in managing and mitigating the effects of narcissism, whether it's in your personal life, at work, or even on the global stage. Now that we've explored the roots and history of narcissism, let's dig deeper into what pathological narcissism really looks like in practice. Let me give you sort of a sense of what the inner psychological apparatus of a narcissistic person looks like. Despite all the shiny, charismatic, charming, arrogant, grandiose stuff on the outside, what's in them is the best I can describe is a volcano. And that volcano, the magma, the gases, the lava is shame. And insecurity also. Well, that's not a very perfect looking, is it? So all these defenses, the grandiosity, the arrogance, and the charm, and the rest of it is just like a manhole cover. A big manhole cover that covers the volcano. So they get to show up as perfect, as extraordinary, but they are not. So, as we mentioned earlier, pathological narcissism isn't just about having an inflated sense of self importance. It's about how those traits manifest in ways that hurt other people. There are three core features that distinguish pathological narcissism, and they are often referred to as the triple E: exploitation, entitlement, and empathy impairment. These traits aren't just bad habits, they are deep ingrained patterns of behavior that can create significant damage in personal relationships, workplaces, and beyond. Let's start with exploitation. Narcissists often see others as tools to be used for their own benefit. Whether it's in relationships or at work, they tend to manipulate and take advantage of others without remorse. This can range from subtle tactics like guilt tipping and gaslighting to more overt behaviors such as taking credit for someone else's work or using people for their own advancement. Now imagine being in a work environment where one person constantly takes credits for others' ideas, okay? Or perhaps a friend who only reaches out when they need something from you. That's exploitation in action, using someone else's time, energy, or resource for personal gain. The second core feature is entitlement. Narcissists believe they deserve special treatment or privileges, often without having to earn them. They feel as though they should always be the center of attention and that their needs should come before anyone else's. For example, in romantic relationships, a narcissistic partner might expect constant admiration and sacrifices from their significant other without offering any reciprocity. They might feel entitled to your time, your love, and even your emotions, while offering very little in return. This sense of entitlement is often rooted in a fragile sense of self esteem where the narcissist requires constant affirmation to feel valued. The third feature is perhaps the most important and devastating one: empathy impairment. Narcissists are often unable to genuinely empathize with others. This means they lack the capacity to understand or care about other people's feelings, needs, or even emotions. They may appear cold, detached, and self absorbed as they prioritize their own desires over everyone else's. This lack of empathy often results in the narcissist treating others as objects to be used, rather than something as real people with their own feelings and needs. In extreme cases, this can lead to emotional abuse in relationships, where the narcissist disregards their partner's feelings entirely. Now, let's bring this all to life with some real life examples. We've all heard about narcissistic celebrities or politicians, right? But pathological narcissism isn't just found in the public eye, it's much closer to home than you might think. Take, for instance, the example of a narcissistic spouse. Imagine a person who constantly demands praise, attention, and validation, but never offers the same in return. They may manipulate their partner into believing that they are unworthy of love or attention unless they meet the narcissist's needs. Over time, the partner begins to feel invisible or insignificant. And what's worse, if the narcissistic spouse feels threatened or criticized, they may retaliate in cruel ways, shutting down, verbally attacking, or even gaslighting their partner. Another example is the narcissistic boss. Have you ever worked for someone who took credit for everything good and blame others for everything bad? Someone who makes everyone around them feel like they are disposable, simply there to serve their needs? That's another classic example of narcissist in a position of power. Someone who exploits others, feels entitled to their success, and lacks any concern for the well being of their employees. The thing with narcissism is that it doesn't just hurt the narcissist, it hurts everyone around them. The people who interact with them, especially in close relationships, often experience significant emotional harm. This is particularly true in relationships with narcissistic parents. Children raised by narcissistic parents often grow up feeling invalidated, unimportant, and emotionally neglected. In some cases, these children develop low self esteem or even struggle with borderline personality disorder because they never had their emotional needs to met in a healthy way. But what's interesting is that while many people think narcissism only results from severe childhood trauma, that's not always the case. Parental neglect or overvaluation can also lead to the development of narcissistic traits. For example, a parent who constantly tells their child that they are the best, the smartest, or the most beautiful, this may create an environment where the child's self worth becomes overly inflated. Over time, this can lead to narcissistic behaviors that persist into adulthood. Now, here's the big question: can narcissism be cured? The answer isn't straightforward. It's important to remember that not all narcissists are the same. Some people exhibit narcissistic traits but don't have full blown narcissistic personality disorder or NPD. For these individuals, therapy may be extremely effective, especially if they are motivated to change. On the other hand, people with severe narcissistic traits or NPD are often resistant to change. They may not see their behavior as a problem, and as a result, they may avoid treatment or refuse to acknowledge their own shortcomings. In these cases, therapies like transference focused psychotherapy or TFP or mentalization based treatment as MBT can help them understand and eventually alter their narcissistic behaviors. But these treatments require a lot of time, effort, and emotional investment. So, in a nutshell, narcissism is not just about being self centered or vain. It's a deep seated personality disorder that can wreak havoc on both the narcissist and the people around them. The triple E, exploitation, entitlement, and empathy impairment, are key markers of pathological narcissism, and recognizing these signs is essential in understanding and dealing with narcissistic behavior in your life. We talked about the core traits of pathological narcissism, exploitation, entitlement, and empathy impairment. Now, how these behaviors show up in real life. Now, let's dive into a little deeper into the psychological mechanisms behind narcissism. Narcissism, especially in its pathological form, is complex and multifaceted. It's not just about self centeredness, there's a whole network of psychological factors that drive narcissistic behavior. To understand how narcissism develops and functions, we need to look at a few key aspects: the unconscious mind, fight or flight responses, and self defense mechanisms. A lot of narcissistic behavior is unconscious. Narcissists often don't realize why they behave the way they do. On a surface level, it might seem like they are simply selfish or self absorbed, but the reality is much more complicated. Deep down, narcissists often feel insecure and fragile. They rely on their inflated self image to protect themselves from feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. You might be thinking, if narcissists are so insecure, why do they act like they are so superior? That's the paradox of narcissism, actually. It's a defense mechanism designed to protect their ego from deep seated shame. The inflated sense of self is, in fact, a mask for fragile self esteem that could easily be shattered by criticism or rejection. That's why they often react so strongly to anything that threatens their image. Now, another psychological factor at play is the fight or flight response. When narcissists feel threatened or challenged, they often don't respond in the same way a non narcissistic person would. Instead of seeking resolution or calmly addressing the situation, narcissists are more likely to go on the defensive or offensive. This means that if a narcissist feels criticized or slighted, whether it's in a personal relationship or at work, they may lash out. This could manifest as verbal attacks, gaslighting, or even shutting people out completely. Their fight or flight response kicks in, and they often fight to maintain their sense of superiority, even if it means harming others in the process. Another important aspect to understand is how narcissists deal with perceived threats to their self image. Often, this leads to a cycle of defense that perpetuates their behavior. When their fragile sense of self is threatened by criticism, failure, or the disapproval of others, they engage in several coping mechanisms to protect themselves. For example, let's say a narcissistic individual is criticized at work. Instead of accepting responsibility or using the feedback to grow, they might blame others or minimize the issue. They may use deflection or projection, shifting the blame onto someone else, or even retaliate with hostility to protect their fragile self esteem. This behavior can create a toxic cycle where the narcissist never truly learns from their mistakes or grow emotionally. Narcissists tend to use certain defense mechanisms to avoid feelings of vulnerability or weakness. These mechanisms allow them to preserve their self image at all costs. Here are a few common ones. Denial. Narcissists may outright deny their flaws or mistakes, often convincing themselves that they are always right. Projection. They may project their own feelings or behaviors onto others, accusing others of the very things they are guilty of. For instance, a narcissist might accuse you of being selfish or manipulative when they are the ones behaving that way. Idolization and devaluation. Narcissists might put someone on a pedestal, idolization, and then tear them down, devaluation, when they no longer serve their needs or fail to meet their expectations. This creates a cycle of extreme emotional highs and lows, which can be incredibly destabilizing for the person being manipulated. These defense mechanisms make it hard to reason with a narcissist. Their whole world is built around avoiding vulnerability and protecting their fragile sense of self worth, which is why they often react so aggressively to any form of criticism or perceived slight. Now, let's take a look at something that's at the core of narcissism: the need for admiration and validation. Narcissists rely heavily on others for validation. Without it, they feel empty and lost. This is why they often surround themselves with people who praise them, admire them, and feed their ego. But here's the catch: no amount of validation is ever enough. It's like trying to fill a bottomless pit. A narcissist will constantly seek praise and admiration, but it won't satisfy their need for self worth so long. This is why they can go from one relationship to another, one career move to the next, or one project to another without ever feeling truly fulfilled. There's always something missing, and that something is a deep internal sense of self worth that is independent of external validation. Let's pause and take a real life example here, okay? Imagine growing up with a narcissistic parent who constantly demands admiration and attention. They may tell you that you're amazing, but only as long as you're doing things that reflect well on them. If you achieve something, they will take credit for it, and if you fail, they will just blame you or anyone else they can. As a child, this can create a deep sense of confusion and self doubt. You might constantly strive to meet their expectations, only to find that nothing is ever good enough for them. This constant cycle of trying to win their approval can leave you feeling emotionally drained and disconnected from your true self. The need for external validation is a powerful force that shapes a narcissist's behavior and often has long term effects on their relationships. So, what can we learn from all of this? The psychological mechanisms behind narcissism shows us that the narcissists aren't simply bad people. They are people who are deeply hurt, insecure, and afraid. They rely on defense mechanisms to shield themselves from vulnerability, and their behavior is driven by a need to protect their fragile self image. But here's the thing: it's not just about them. Narcissism has a profound effect on other people, the people around them. Whether it's a romantic partner, a child, a colleague, or a friend, the psychological impact of narcissistic behavior can be devastating. Now that we've explored the psychological mechanisms behind narcissism, let's talk about the emotional toll of being around a narcissist. The people who are closest to a narcissist, whether it's a spouse, a family member, or a colleague, often experience significant emotional damage. This damage can be insidious and slow, creeping up over time in ways that are hard to recognize at first. Narcissists are masters of manipulation and they know exactly how to exploit people's emotions to get what they want. This is why it's so important to understand the science and effects of narcissistic abuse. One of the most damaging tactics a narcissist can use is gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of emotional manipulation where the narcissist makes you question your own reality. They may deny things they said or did, distort facts, or make you feel like you're overreacting when you express hurt or frustration. Let's imagine a scenario, okay? You tell a narcissistic partner that something they did upset you. Maybe they made you a hurtful comment or ignored your feelings. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging your feelings, they turn it around and accuse you of being overly sensitive or too emotional. Over time, this can make you feel like you're losing your grip on reality. You start to doubt yourself, your emotions, and even your memory. Gaslighting can make you feel crazy, even though you are simply reacting to their hurtful behavior. One another insidious tactics narcissistic individuals use, especially when they are confronted or held accountable, is something called DARVO, which stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's a psychological defense mechanism that allows them to avoid responsibility for their actions while turning the blame onto the very person calling them out. Let's break them down. Denying. They refuse to acknowledge that they did something wrong. Attacking. Instead of addressing the accusation, they go on the offensive, often with insults or counterclaims. Reverse victim and offender. They flip the script, positioning themselves as the real victim and making the accuser seem like the aggressor. Let's put this into perspective with some examples. The unfaithful partner. Imagine a woman finds proof that her narcissistic partner has been cheating on her. She calmly confronts him about it, saying, I saw the message. Can we talk about this? Deny. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're making things up. Attack. Why you're always snooping through my phone? Do you even trust me? Maybe the real problem here is your insecurity. Reverse victim and offender. I can't believe you would accuse me of something like this. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? You're the one ruining this relationship with your constant suspicion. Now, instead of the conversation being about his infidelity, it becomes about her paranoia and lack of trust. The original issue is completely sidelined and she might even end up apologizing. This is a classic Darwa. The narcissistic boss. Let's take this into workplace. Suppose an employee brings up a legitimate concern to their narcissistic boss, maybe about unfair treatment or being overworked. Deny. That's ridiculous. I treat all my employees fairly. Attack. You're clearly not cut out for this job. If you can't handle it, you just let it go. Reverse victim and offender. You know what? I'm really disappointed in you. I thought you were a team player, but clearly all you care about is complaining. In both examples, Darrow shifts the focus away from the narcissist action and onto the person who dared to hold them accountable. It's highly effective strategy because it leaves the victim feeling confused, guilty, and sometimes even questioning their own reality. This tactic works because most people don't like confrontation. They'd rather back down than keep pushing. The narcissist's reversal of roles can make the victim feel guilty, even if they were in the right. Many victims, especially those in close relationships with narcissists, want to be seen as good people, and the narcissist exploits that by making them doubt themselves. If you recognize Darbo happening to you, the best thing you can do is don't get emotional. Narcissists feed off that energy. If they attack or try to flip the script, don't take the bait. The more you entertain their tactics, the more they will use them. Walking away or refusing to engage can be the best move you can ever do. Another common experience for people dealing with narcissists is constant criticism. Narcissists often undermine others to make themselves feel superior. This isn't about constructive feedback, it's about belittling and tearing someone down. They might criticize your appearance, your decisions, or your accomplishments, all while elevating themselves at your expense. For instance, in a romantic relationship with a narcissist, they might frequently point out your flaws or remind you of past mistakes. This can lead to a damaging pattern of self doubt where you begin to believe that you are not good enough or that everything you do is wrong. The emotional weight of constant criticism can create feelings of hopelessness and despair. It can feel like you'll never be able to please them, no matter what you do. As we discussed earlier, one of the key traits of narcissism is an impairment in empathy. Narcissists struggle to truly understand or care about the feelings of others. This lack of empathy makes them incapable of offering genuine emotional support or validation. Imagine you're going through a difficult time. Maybe you've lost a loved one, faced a job setback, or experiencing a personal struggles. Instead of offering support or understanding, a narcissist might respond with indifference or even dismissal. They might change the subject to make it all about themselves, or they may act like your problems are not important because they are too focused on their own needs. This can leave you feeling isolated, alone, and invalidated, even though you're surrounded by people. If you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you know what it's like to feel like you're walking on eggshells. Narcissists can be volatile and emotionally unpredictable, and you never quite know when they might react negatively. It's common for people in these relationships to feel they have to tiptoe around the narcissist, be careful not to push their buttons. This constant vigilance and can be just emotionally exhausting. You start to second guess everything you say and do, always worried about how the narcissist will react. Over time, this can lead to anxiety and stress and a sense of powerlessness. You might feel like you're losing yourself, caught in a cycle of pleasing the narcissist and avoiding conflict. The relationship dynamics with a narcissist often follow a cycle. First, there's love bombing, a period where the narcissist showers you with attention, praise, and affection. This phase is meant to draw you in, making you feel like you're the most important person in their life. But once they have secured your attachment, the narcissist may shift into the devaluation phase. Suddenly, you are not as special anymore. You might withdraw affection, criticize you, or engage in stonewalling, refusing to communicate or acknowledge your feelings. This back and forth between love bombing and devaluation creates a toxic emotional roller coaster that leaves you feeling confused, unworthy, and emotionally drained. Let's take another example here, okay? This time you are in a workplace. Imagine you have a narcissistic boss who constantly takes credit for your ideas and belittles your contributions. When you try to stand up for yourself, they might accuse you of being difficult or uncooperative. But when things go well, they're quick to claim the success as their own. This kind of behavior can leave you feeling undervalued and disrespected. Over time, you might begin to question your own abilities, even though you know you're capable. The emotional toll of being around someone like this can lead to burnout, depression, and a loss of self esteem. It's a perfect example of how narcissism doesn't just affect personal relationships, it can infiltrate every aspect of life. So, what does all this mean for someone who's in a relationship with a narcissist? Well, the emotional damage can be long lasting and often it leaves people with deep scars. Constant manipulation, lack of empathy, and emotional instability can lead to feelings of anxiety, self doubt, and depression. But there's hope. Healing from narcissistic abuse is possible. Now that we've discussed the emotional toll of being around a narcissist, let's focus on something empowering: how to heal and reclaim yourself after experiencing narcissistic abuse. It's important to remember that while the damage can be profound, healing is possible. It won't happen overnight and it won't be easy, but with the right tools, mindset, and support, people can reclaim their authentic selves and start living fulfilling lives again. The first and perhaps most crucial step in healing is to recognize the impact that narcissistic abuse had on you. Often, people who have been in a relationship with narcissists feel confused or disoriented, as I mentioned earlier. They may not even fully understand what they've been through. The gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and psychological abuse can leave you questioning your own reality. To start the healing process, it's essential to acknowledge the abuse. This means understanding that what you've been experienced was not just a bad relationship or a difficult person, but a pattern of manipulation and control also. That's emotionally damaging. You should just be aware of. One of key components of healing is learning how to set boundaries. Narcissists often disrespect boundaries or even outright violate them. They push your limits, expecting you to cater to their needs at all costs. But in order to heal and to protect yourself, it's critical to establish clear, firm boundaries with the narcissist. Setting boundaries may look like cutting contact with the narcissist, or it could mean creating more space in your interactions with them. This isn't about getting back at them, it's about protecting your emotional health. Boundaries can help you reclaim a sense of control and stop the narcissist from continuing to manipulate you. It's just easy, actually. Another way to heal from this trauma and this experience is therapy. Therapy is another powerful tool in the healing process. Transference focused psychotherapy, TFP, for example, is a treatment specifically designed for people who have been affected by narcissistic abuse. In TFP, the therapist helps the individual understand the dynamics of relationships and how these experiences shapes their sense of self. Understanding your emotional wounds and traumas is key to healing. Working with a therapist can help you process your emotions, recognize unhealthy patterns, and begin to rebuild your self esteem. Over time, therapy can help you recognize your own needs, wants, and desires, things that may have been buried during your relationship with a narcissist. After narcissistic abuse, many people feel like they have lost themselves. Narcissists have a way of making you feel small or insignificant, often overshadowing your own sense of identity. Healing involves rebuilding your self esteem and rediscovering who you truly are, independent of the narcissist influence. This can involve doing things that bring you joy and help you reconnect with your passions. You might rediscover old hobbies or explore new interests or even reconnect with the friends and family who support you. This process of self rediscovery is not about trying to be someone you are not, but it's about reclaiming the part that you were suppressed or overlooked. When healing from narcissistic abuse, it's vital to surround yourself with a supportive network of people who understand and validate your experiences. This could be close friends, family members, or a support group of people who have experienced narcissistic abuse. One of the most common feelings people experience after having a narcissistic relationship is self blame. Many people think, how could I have let this happen? How did I stay so long? It's important to understand that narcissistic abuse is insidious and difficult to escape. The manipulation, the gaslighting, and the emotional highs and lows create an environment where it's easy to become emotionally dependent on the narcissist. In the healing process, it's crucial to forgive yourself. Understand that you are manipulated and you didn't deserve to be treated the way you were. Healing involves self compassion, and part of that is giving yourself permission to stop feeling guilty for things that weren't your fault. You were doing the best you could under difficult circumstances, and it's time to let go of the shame and focus on your recovery. Finally, it's important to acknowledge that healing is a journey, not a destination. The road to recovery is nonlinear. There will be good days and bad days, progress and setbacks, but with every step forward, you will become stronger, wiser, and more in touch with your authentic self. It's also essential to remember that healing doesn't mean erasing the past. You don't have to forget what happened, but you can integrate it into your story in a way that empowers you. So, while it might feel impossible right now, I want to remind you that healing from narcissistic abuse is absolutely possible. People who have been through the worst kinds of emotional manipulation and control can come out the other side stronger, more self aware, and more aligned with who they truly are. We've covered a lot of ground already, and now I want to talk about long term healing and how to keep yourself grounded after you've started to recover from narcissistic abuse. The journey to full healing doesn't end once you've put some distance between yourself and the narcissist. In fact, that's just the beginning. So let's explore how you can maintain your emotional health in the long run and continue to build a positive, empowered life moving forward. One of the best ways to ensure long term emotional health is to implement practices that keep you grounded and connected to your own well being. Regular self care routines such as mindfulness practices, meditation, journaling, and physical exercise can help you stay emotionally stable. To sum up, healing from narcissistic abuse is possible. It's a journey and it's not always easy, but you're strong enough to take back your power. With the right tools, support, and commitment to your own healing, you can create a future that is free from narcissistic influence. A future where your voice heard, your boundaries are respected, and your true authentic self is celebrated. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode helped shed some light on the complexities of narcissism and how it affects our lives. Take care of yourselves and keep moving forward toward the healing you deserve. If you like the podcast, you can leave us 5 stars review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're listening to us on YouTube, you can also subscribe to the channel and leave us a comment. I really appreciate your feedbacks. Now, as always, stay curious and see you next episode.